All right, let's dive in. We hear all the time about these ambitious government plans that are going to change the world. But what really happens after the big announcement? Today, we're digging into the story of India's massive push for an ethanol economy and the one person who pretty much turned a policy on paper into a multi-billion-dollar reality. Yeah, this quote right here, it gets to the very heart of our story. For Funny Mohan Kancharla, the man who would go on to build India's ethanol industry, this was never just about a different kind of fuel. It was about building a whole new future for India. And that belief, it would drive a 2-decade journey from a simple idea to a national powerhouse. Okay, so let's set the scene. The year is 2003, and India launches its super ambitious ethanol blending program. The goal? It was huge. They wanted to start mixing ethanol with petrol to cut the country's reliance on fossil fuels. A really bold, forward-thinking policy. But here's the thing about big ideas and government policies, they don't build themselves. A declaration is just words on paper, right? So the real question becomes, who actually steps in to turn that paper into pipelines and supply chains and a market that actually works? Who's the one who actually builds the future? And that, right there, leads us to our first big idea. A policy, no matter how brilliant it sounds, is really just a blueprint. It needs an architect, someone to actually design the future and oversee its construction. Okay, so take a look at this. What's wild is the massive gap it shows. On one hand, you've got these fantastic policy goals, but on the other side, you have the harsh reality on the ground. No infrastructure, no supply chains, and zero market confidence. The whole shebang had to be built literally from the ground up. And this is where our architect steps onto the scene, Fani Mohan Kancharla. He was an expert in agricultural commodities, and he looked at that giant gap and didn't see a problem. He saw a massive opportunity. He knew someone had to step in and build the bridge between the policy and the reality. So how in the world do you build an entire industry from scratch? Let's dig into the nitty-gritty of that foundational work, creating the actual backbone for the whole ethanol economy. So what was his game plan? He broke it down into 3 absolutely crucial steps. First up, he had to build the actual supply chains, connecting the people making ethanol and its raw material, molasses, to the places they needed to go. Second, he had to set up the trade logistics, the real pathways for commerce. And third, and this is probably the most important piece of the puzzle, he had to create market confidence. He had to prove this new policy wasn't just a dream, but a real, bankable business. And listen, this wasn't just some abstract idea. His work had a huge impact on real people and real businesses. By creating these new pathways, he basically threw a lifeline to companies that were completely stranded, helping them find new global markets and, well, thrive. But getting the domestic industry off the ground, that was just step 1. The next big hurdle was proving that Indian ethanol could actually compete on the world stage. This timeline really lays out the whole 20-year journey. It kicks off in 2003 with that hard, gritty work of building the first supply chains. Then, bam, 2005, a huge milestone. He facilitates the first bulk ethanol exports. This was the moment that proved Indian ethanol wasn't just some domestic project, it was the real deal globally. By 2009, his role completely changes. He's not just a builder anymore. He's a full-on advocate representing the industry at international forums. Then, after the 2015 Paris Agreement, he pivots again, making sure the industry is aligned with global sustainability standards. And this whole journey leads to 2021, when he becomes a key advisor for India's most ambitious goal yet. So you see this shift, right? He went from being the logistics guy to a major global voice for the entire industry. He wasn't just moving product anymore. He was shaping the entire international conversation about it, presenting his insights everywhere from New Orleans to Coimbatore and Delhi. And all that global influence, it led straight into the next super critical chapter of this story, making sure India's ethanol industry was built to last, built on a sustainable foundation. Okay, so the 2015 Paris Agreement, that was a game changer. All of a sudden, sustainability wasn't just a nice idea, it was basically a requirement to play on the global stage. Kancharla got this seismic shift and worked to make sure India's biofuels were seen as a key part of the solution to climate change, not part of the problem. So how'd he do it? Simple. He got a seat at the table. He joined these major global organizations like the Roundtable on Sustainable Biomaterials and Bonsucro, making sure India wasn't just participating, but meeting the highest global standards. And as you can imagine, that kind of expertise became insanely valuable. I mean, look at this list. This is when you know your influence has hit the big leagues. Global financial powerhouses like Citibank and Goldman Sachs, they all came to him for advice on how to navigate this new energy landscape in India. And all of this work, all this effort, it funnels down to this one number, 20%. This is India's national goal for ethanol blending by 2025. That's a crazy ambitious target, and it's all built on the foundation that people like Kancharla spent 2 decades putting into place. So, when you step back and look at it all, what's the real legacy here? What's the lasting impact of this incredible journey? You know, there's a quote in our source material that just nails it. Progress isn't just about big announcements from the government or some cool new technology. It's about the folks on the ground with the vision and, honestly, the guts to work tirelessly to make it real. When you boil it all down, his success was this really rare mix of skills. He had the strategic vision to see the opportunity, the technical know-how to build the nuts and bolts, and the global savvy to put India on the map. He wasn't just a businessman. He was a champion for a whole new way of thinking. And that kind of leaves us with a final thought to chew on. We hear about new policies all the time, these grand plans that are supposed to shape our world. But this story is a powerful reminder that policy just points us in a direction. The real work is done by the architects. So, yeah, it really makes you think. Who are the architects building your future?